Hello and welcome to the FUTVE English podcast, your one-stop shop for Venezuelan football in English, bringing you fortnightly episodes dedicated to the Venezuelan League, the national teams and the myriad of Venezuelan players around the world. And today I am joined by Oliver Cawthorne, a football player born in Venezuela but now living in England. He came through the professional academies of several teams in Caracas and then at the age of 16 moved to England with his family, where he has since played at county level, captaining Staffordshire to the County Cup and now playing for Loughborough University football team. Oliver, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
No, thanks to you, Jordan. Pleasure's mine. I'm good, thanks. I'm very glad to be here, and yeah.
This is a combination of nationalities, of life paths that people won't expect. You're Venezuelan English, which is probably a rare combination nowadays. Born and raised in Venezuela and now living in England, a Venezuelan mother and an English father. Tell us, how did that come about?
Every time I say that, it is an eye-opener because it's not very common, but my dad's a journalist, you see, so he traveled to South America from very young, and one of those countries was Venezuela, and met my mom, who coincidentally was also a journalist there, so that's how they met. Yeah, I was just born there, and I'm happy to be able to share both these amazing cultures and have that connection with both countries, because I really find that amazing where I can relate to people in one as well as the other so well, and just having those connections is just incredible for me.
And how do people normally react when they first find out that you're from Venezuela, particularly probably in England? You're talking English, and whilst your accent may give away that you weren't born in England, probably people don't expect you to say that you're Venezuelan. So how do people react?
Oh, well, you'll find this funny. In the football world, the first thing people say is, "Oh, that's where Solomon Rondon's from." So that. Because of course he passed through West Brom and Newcastle, so I go, yep, that's exactly the place. You're not wrong there. And yeah, they either ask me, they either relate to football through Rondon and players in Europe, or obviously politically wise, oh, how things over there and stuff. So people are aware of the country. Rarely do I get people saying, what is that?
Yeah.
So it's. So people know about Venezuela more than you'd think, really, here in England.
So you were obviously born in 2002, and
yes,
growing up, your early childhood is really a time period where the national team were booming under the leadership of Richard Paez, who was manager from 2001 to 2007. Do you think you became interested in football, you became a football fan and ultimately a football player because of that increase in the football culture in Venezuela, or is it an influence from your father, who I know is a Stoke fan?
It's definitely got to be a bit of both, because before I moved to Venezuela, because of course I lived in Africa the first 5 years of my life, I had this passion for football, because of my father. But since I moved to Venezuela, 100%, there was a growing love for the Vinotinto. Every game they played, it's kind of like the people I was surrounded by as well were always watching, always kind of aware of what was going on. That was, it was really good to be part of that. And it kind of like created like a growing love for the Vinotinto inside me, because you see nowadays, like you, I stay up till 2-3 in the morning just to watch the Vinotinto games here in England. And for example, the other day in uni, I got a complaint because of course we beat Chile 2-1, and I just started shouting and jumping in the roof, so I had people knocking on the door telling me to shut up. But yeah, I definitely fell in love as the Vinotinto started booming, and I think it's still in a growing process, and the sky's the limit, really. And of course, with the objective to reach their first World Cup, and if that could come soon, it would just be incredible for the country.
And that increase in Venezuela's footballing prowess on the national stage is something that has really unified the support of football in the country, in the men's and the women's game. And you're now 19, and I know that over the past 6 months or so, you've been sounded out about interest in potentially attending under 20 modules. How did that opportunity come about, and how How did that make you feel as you know, a Venezuelan born and bred to have left the country at 16 to come to England and then hear that they were interested in calling you up to the national youth teams? That must have been like every boy's dream. It must have been incredible for you.
Yeah, definitely. As soon as I like heard just being linked and like the rumors with it, you know, it just meant the world for me, because since small it was clear in my head that, you know, if I could ever have the privilege to play for a country, it would definitely be Venezuela, just because I feel that so much more attached to it in that sense. So I was actually on holiday in Panama, and I got a message from an ex-coach saying they've been inquiring about you, and you know, that just meant the world for me. And just being linked with it, knowing that I did have an influence there to even be considered, is just, you know, incredible. It's what I've always wanted, really. Of course, ideally in the future, being either called up would be great, but you know, I've just got to stay focused and work hard, and you know, good things come to those who do that. So just got to be patient.
So what were your early years like of playing in football in Venezuela? Because as much as the game has progressed in the past, say 20 years in Venezuela, and it is on a continual upward turn, we do know that the setups, the youth setups, aren't as professionalized as they are in England and Europe, and it's something that they were really trying hard to address. So what was it like for you to have your footballing education in Venezuela, and what were your experiences of playing for professional academies?
If I'm honest, more than anything, it was really interesting, exciting, because it was something different to what you'd expect in Europe, you know, like these small 5v5 with small goals to get people on the floor. It's completely the opposite, you know. From like the ages of 8, we'd be playing 11v11 on these full-sized fields with, you know, man-sized goals, like, you know, professional-sized goals. So obviously the game would be much different. It would take a different turn, and it would basically be, you know, whoever had the biggest kick and to get it over a keeper, or, you know, any lucky bounce would go in. It's incredible how, you know, how different the style of it was compared to how you think the approach would be here in Europe. But still, it had that that individual aspect to it that made it really fun, because you know it's different. You're playing on these pitches that, you know, aren't incredible, but it just adds to the excitement. It's just something different that I really enjoyed from. When I was small, I used to play with a player who's actually currently with the under-21s in Deportivo La Guaira, called Clyde Garcia, and he, you know, he's an amazing player. And you know, I just remember me and him being in the middle of the park, kind of controlling that, and you know, shooting from miles out and scoring. So yeah, it's great memories. Also, one of my first coaches was Tony Barbosa, who, you know, sadly passed away recently, but he was an important figure in my growing up in Venezuela, because he was everything I didn't expect in a coach. He'd shout at me, you know, swear, kind of like all that things you would never expect someone to say to little kids, and what would I think here would be considered kind of inappropriate, but you know, I thought it was personally amazing. And he'd do things like when we were training, if he was a big Barcelona fan, so he'd make the Real Madrid boys run twice as much. And you know, I said, you know, I support Stoke, so he said, get on the Barcelona side, mate, and I'd save me from running there. So yeah, it was just, you know, full of happy, fun experiences. And you know, it's the coaches really that made it fun as well. As I said, Tony, you know, also Atsen Marks, currently under 21 assistant. He you know, I played under him for a year, and you know, it's just things like he said to motivate the group. He said that if we won, he'd get a tattoo of the group's choice. So that just really like, I don't know why, but that just put a smile on our faces and motivated us every day, because we as the group, we decided, and you know, we got the funniest guy in the group, and we said, you're going to tattoo his face on your back if we win this tournament. And you know, sadly we got knocked out in the final, but you know, it's kind of things like that that just made it really fun to play in Venezuela during my childhood.
Awesome. What teams did you play for?
I started out at Real Sport, which is now currently Deportivo La Guaira. but most of it was at Estudiantes de Caracas, who I think sadly aren't competing anymore recently from the, I think they may have folded, but yeah, I spent about 7-8 years there, and they were magical years because I felt the board, it was kind of like from the top to the bottom, everyone treated you with the same respect, and it was kind of like everyone was part of the same unit there for every tournament, every team. So it was a great experience, especially when the last 2 years they made this selectivo, which was kind of like an elite 30-man squad with the best players from under 14s to under 18s. And yeah, well, I originally wasn't in it, I wasn't picked to be in that 30-man squad, so I was really, buggered off. But the first game came along, a preseason friendly, and I actually, it kind of like gave me that fire inside me because I wanted to be part of those 30 elite. So I played extremely well. Well, I must have, because the coach then, who I didn't know at the time, who was leading that selectivo, was Manolo Contreras, and he told me, "You need to come and train with us, mate." So, that actually turned my world upside down, because that was the year I learned the most under him, tactically wise, because I think he's a genius. The way he sees the game and giving me that insight was just incredible. And I still speak to him, very frequently to the day, and just discuss tactics. It's just fun, and yeah, I learned so much.
It's great to hear the stories of your time with the other players of your generation, and to talk so highly of the coaches, because one criticism that some people have of Liga FUTVE is of the tactical aspect of the game, but from your experience with Contreras is quite the opposite. When you came to England, did you notice when you were competing against English players, when you were playing in the County Cup, Staffordshire, for example, was a tactical difference prominent in the way that you were used to playing and experiencing to what you are now experiencing here in England?
Jordan, you may think I'm crazy, right? Because of what I'm about to say, but tactically wise, okay, maybe it's not applied the same in Venezuela, maybe because, I don't know, the quality of maybe players or the pitches, but the managers themselves, at least the ones that I've been managed by, are so much tactically above, in the sense of how much they care about tactics, than managers here in England. It's kind of like every movement of every player is analyzed to like maximum detail, and we'd even spend hours just talking through a chalkboard, where does this person have to go, and kind of every player would have to know every other player's movements. So I always found that was very useful. But when I came here to England, like, to my surprise, it's not as tactical. Like, I'm not saying, obviously, it's not like a get on the pitch and have a run around. No, it's obviously not that either. But they don't look at it in so much detail, which actually may have its pros as well, because it lets a player kind of discover themselves. Maybe doesn't restrict them as much. But yeah, I've been coached by a coach like ex-Tottenham Academy coach here at Loughborough, Richard Allen, and I think he's a fantastic coach, but still isn't like obsessed over the tactics either, compared to like how a few of my coaches were in Venezuela.
So since coming to England, like I touched on earlier, you've represented Staffordshire at county level, Newcastle Town as well, and now you're playing for Loughborough University. Talk us through some of your high points since coming to England. Obviously, I know you've won a few competitions, and you've been really dominant from the back. I've watched some of your games and you playing, and it's really nice to see you breaking the mold of what people would expect from a defender of your height.
A high point would definitely have to be winning that Midlands County Cup with Staffordshire, because of course, as a captain, being able to lift my first trophy as a captain as well was just a massive honor, and for a team that I was actually selected to based on club performance as well, was just incredible. So that would definitely have to be a high point, especially after the final. The conditions were not great at all. It was actually the last game we played before going into quarantine here, Yeah, it was just raining. The pitch was like ridiculously muddy, and it would, kind of like that typical English picture of a final. So yeah, just playing in a final, because it's what a footballer lives for, really is. And yeah, that was just definitely the peak of since I've got here. But when I joined Loughborough, I've been playing with lads, coming from academies, top academies from all over the country, and of course different ages, because some lads are older, and I was probably the youngest there. But yeah, just playing with them, being surrounded by that kind of quality is definitely a high point. That first training session, I still remember, I was like, whoa, Dad, these lads are good when I got home. Yeah, just being surrounded by people who are good and can always make you better as a footballer. It's where you want to be. You're in the right environment. So I know playing at Loughborough with those kind of lads and the managers that are there, it's definitely helped me improve a lot.
So having that really strong youth development in Venezuela, and then coming to England, playing at county level and having that success, and now playing at university team that's considered one of the best, if not the best, sports university in the country, has been a great pathway of progression for you. You're now 19 years old and have professional ambitions for the rest of your career. What do you think your next steps are, and what are you looking for at the moment?
I play football first of all because of the love of the game. I'm not in it for, as people would say, money or, greed, or just because it's just the way forward. No, I play it because, every time I step on a football pitch, it's just the best feeling in the world. Probably my favorite thing after family. So ideally, I'd like to play professionally, dedicate, years to just football. And, if it could be anywhere in the world, I'm cool with it, as long as I'm playing, getting to that professional level is a massive step. But, being able to do that anywhere would just be a dream for me, like a dream come true, literally. So that's what hopefully I'm working hard for, and will be able to be achieved soon.
Yeah, and I know you've spoken about potentially a return to Venezuela and a dream to play in Liga FUTVE. Do you have like a favorite team? Did you support a particular team as a kid?
So yeah, it's definitely a dream of mine to play in Liga FUTVE sometime or another, and a return there would just be incredible, especially because there will probably be players that I grew up playing against. If I had to pick a favorite team to play with, obviously it would be Estudiantes de Caracas, who I played for as an academy. But if they're not around, then the biggest club in Caracas is Caracas Sports Club. So they've got an incredible history. So being able to play for them would always just be incredible.
For those who haven't heard of you before and haven't watched the videos, how would you describe your style of game? What's your footballing philosophy, and what do you try to show when you're on the ball?
Of course, I'm a center back normally, almost all the time. I consider myself one, and I think as a center back in the modern game, you've got to try and keep the ball on the ground. I feel I'm able to play from the back, but also as a defender, you've got to have that aggression. I feel like in the air, no one should be able to beat me. I think every time I go up, it's in my mind, this is mine. I don't really recall losing in the air, and if I do, I'd knock the other guy down with me. So yeah, those are two of my main aspects, but also tackles. And I feel one of my biggest attributes is being able to read the game, because if you can kind of read the game and see things before they actually happen, it's really helpful when anticipating, and knowing when to pick the right pass, or putting the right movements. As Venezuelan coaches kind of like put in my mind, it's always being in the right place at the right time. So I feel like that's probably what I'm best at, really.
Yeah, I particularly like the way that I describe you as like a ball playing centre back. Like if somebody asked me, quickly, what's Oliver like? I'd say that he was a ball playing centre back, confident with the ball at his feet. But obviously you're 194 centimeters. You're a very tall, imposing centre back, which a lot of coaches look for by default in a defender. But you've got like a really expansive game, which I liked a lot, and I think you could have a great future in Venezuelan football or here in Europe. But as interesting as your stories are, Your dad also has some incredibly interesting stories, not just in Venezuela, but in football in general. Particularly, I think, has to be my favorite. And you'll be, of course, too young to remember, if not even before your time. But he's played football with Diego Maradona. Like, tell us about that.
First of all, I myself still don't believe that story when he tells it to me. I'm like, shut up. But then, he's even got pictures, so he's got like the evidence, and yeah, that was actually before I was born, sadly, because now obviously Maradona's sadly passed away, but meeting him, it's kind of like tick. I've completed everything I've ever wanted. But he had the privilege of just being in Cuba when Maradona went there for rehab treatment, and my dad's colleague actually was Argentinian. He was called Alfredo. So Alfredo and my dad, I think Alfredo a bit more because, that Argentina connection, but, became amazing friends actually. And next thing you know it, they're, having barbecues together, watching Boca Juniors games on a Saturday afternoon with a barbecue in the back, and then going for a swim in the pool. And my dad actually called his best friend and he said, hey, up, I've got Diego Maradona here, and if you want to meet him, now's your chance. And his best friend Mark was over in a week, and it's kind of like fulfilling his dream too. So they had a good connection, and maybe I wouldn't call them friends, but he definitely lived an incredible experience there, and playing at the Cuba National Stadium against Maradona and his friends was just kind of like a dream come true for him. But funny thing is, Maradona's kind of like representative told my dad and the journalist kind of team, he said, guys, Maradona, he's not in a great state, take it easy. And they were like, okay, but it is Maradona. Yeah. But next thing you know it, Maradona is like dribbling past them, like probably not, definitely like he's incredibly fat, big, not in shape, and he's still skipping past 11 players and popping in the back of the net and celebrating as if he's scoring that World Cup kind of goal. So it's just just magical, really.
Yeah, it's definitely one to be envious of. Also, your dad's career, his time in Venezuela, has afforded you opportunities and experiences that many people around the world and in Europe don't have. Though some of those experiences were good as well as bad. I know you had some amazing experiences, but also some things that nobody would ever want to go through. And what were some of like the highs and lows as the child of a journalist who spent time in Venezuela, spent time in Africa, in places that were quite volatile?
There's definitely that low of leaving a place you love, because I fell in love with both places that I kind of had the big moves from, which were Africa, because I had my best friends were there at the time, obviously very young, but my football was also there. I was enjoying it, but more than anything, it was when I left Venezuela, because obviously I was playing part of this selectivo that I was telling you about with Estudiantes, and half the team, like 2 or 3 lads in the team, were playing for Vinotinto, so the level was incredibly high, pushing us. It was pushing me every day. I had this mate called Carlos Falla, who I think is now playing in Spain, but he was in the Vinotinto, and just having him beside me was kind of like pushing me every day. But having to leave, and obviously this amazing coach that I had and this relationship I had with him, Manolo Contreras, of course, and Victor Castro, because they were part of the coaching staff then, especially because in Venezuela they've got that apertura and clausura, so I just played the apertura, and yeah, it's kind of like the last thing you want is to leave a job half done and push for the kind of the second half of the season. But that was really tough for me, especially not knowing how things were going to go in England and how different it would be, because you want to stay where things are going good, where you're comfortable and pushing yourself. But in the end, it's all for the best, really. And it did take me a while to adapt to England, because football is definitely more physical here. I'm not sure if it's in the nature of people, or because it's just wet surfaces everywhere, so people are just going to slide in behind you. But yeah, playing with a wet ball all the time, and it took me a while to adapt, but every change is for the best. And I think it's that change, no matter how tough it was, has made me a much better player I am today, really.
Yeah, of course. And I think it would be a waste of opportunity not to address what I'd like to talk about next. For many people, Venezuelan and non, it would be strange to hear that you, as a 16-year-old, were firstly sad to leave Venezuela, and secondly, now 2-3 years later, would actually like to go back, because the stereotype is the other way around, that people, a lot of people, young people with opportunity, would like to leave, and a lot of people say that, you know, they don't want to go back as much as they love their country, and, you know, often have family and friends still there. It's a choice that they feel like they have to make. Kevin Vivas, one of my good friends who runs Unse FUTVE, and also has involvement with FUTVE English. He's between my age and your age. I think he's about 23 now, but he had the opportunity to leave Venezuela a couple of years ago, and he went to Miami and was actually there for, I think, about 6 months, and chose to return because, although not a football player, he missed Liga FUTVE. He missed being part of going to games, being with his friends. He missed his country, and he decided to go back, even though the rest of his family had left. His dad spends half the year in Venezuela, half the year outside of it, but his brothers, his sisters, his mum, all of them have left Venezuela and around the world. Kevin, after 6 months in Miami, actually decided to go back. And that's curious to a lot of people. So talk us through your experiences of why you were sad to leave. Obviously, the football was a big part of it, and the football's a big part of wanting to go back. But there's surely more to it, because a lot of people would think, oh, you're crazy to want to actively go and live in Venezuela, and so many people are leaving. And similarly, you had the opportunity to leave and you were sad, whereas I imagine a lot of people similar age to you would have grabbed the opportunity to leave. Sadly, that's the way things are. So talk us through why your experiences are literally the opposite.
FUTVE just has this kind of magic about it, not just FUTVE, but South American football in general. It's just attractive. It's a place you want to be. It's something you want to kind of live around, and being a part of it, of course, in my case, would just be spectacular, especially with so many of the teams competing in international tournaments such as the Libertadores and the Sudamericana, which Champions League and Europa League of South American football. The fact that Venezuela offers that, as well as a pretty competitive league that's expanse all over the country, not just Caracas. You've got your teams in almost every state. It just shows that football's everywhere there, and it's more than football, it's the people around it. Obviously not talking about governing bodies, but like the managers and people who form part of those day-to-day clubs in the running of them, the players. Now I've got so many like mates and people I know playing there, and it just shows it's a good place to be. Recently with Danny Perez, who was used to be a great friend of mine because we used to play together, just shows it also offers that opportunity. If you do well there, it's not like it won't be unnoticed. Doing well in Liga FUTVE can actually take you places. So it's not a bad place to be at all. And of course, all the fun and excitement that surrounds it, that speaks for itself, really.
Obviously, I've said it numerous times, and it's not because I don't believe it, but maybe the listeners won't. Like, at the end of the day, also, it is your country. You are Venezuelan, as English as you sound, and as English as you look as well. And even the name Oliver Cawthorne, like, people aren't going to think Venezuelan, but it's your country, and it's natural to feel separated from it when you're not physically there. So obviously, you'd be going home as well, in a sense, if you went back to play football in Venezuela.
Definitely, yeah. It's my home country. I was born there. It's my people, basically. So it's something I really want. Obviously, definitely, still obviously got that English side to me, which I've always had, always known as Catire or whatever, which is like blondie, because even though I'm not blonde clearly, but it's still lighter hair than probably everyone there. But yeah, it's being English always. It kind of like had a funny side as well. Because before every game, when the refs would read the list, they would go, I don't know, Jesus Perez, and then they'd go Oliver, and that kind of a pause, long pause, and then I just go, yeah, that's me. I'll save you the pronunciation. because just absolutely no one could pronounce it right. And, every time I went to training, I have managers come to me like, Cawthorne and things like that. Like, am I doing it well? And I'm like, no, but good try.
Yeah, the H
So
must
yeah,
throw everyone off.
yeah, it was funny, definitely.
So obviously you've spoken about how much of a pride it would be to represent Venezuela, and of course having that interest around possibly going to a module shows that it's not out of reach. Are you able to like shed light on why it didn't happen in the end? I saw that the under-20 module over Christmas was only players that were based in Venezuela. Was that the ultimately the deciding factor?
Well, if I'm 100% honest with you, Jordan, I don't know. It might have been that factor, but in the end of the day, I read the list or wasn't contacted and I wasn't there. But I'm not down about it or anything. If anything, I like following them, tracking their progress, and I like seeing them do well as, they finished runners-up in the Copa Santa Lucia, which has just recently been played. Yeah, the fact that I'm not there, I don't see it as a downside. More than anything, it just motivates me to carry on working hard. And of course, just as I said before, just that rumor, that link, that slight, the fact that they talked about me, for me is a massive honor, just my name just sounded. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to keep on working to, try and get there. And if it's not under 20s, so I'm turning 20 next year. Well, the goal will move to be, the first team, but obviously it'll be a massive step, big dream, but there's nothing wrong in dreaming, and I'll work hard to try and achieve it.
That ambition as well is like, and I can see you're saying that with a smile on your face, which the listeners won't be able to see, and it's making me smile to hear someone talk about football with such love and passion. Ambition is incredible, and it's in a world where so many footballers are micromanaged by agents and reps and media managers. To hear someone talk with that boyish love of the game is inspiring for me as not just a football fan, but someone that has a lot of love for Liga FUTVE. It's lovely to hear. So is there anything you'd like to tell listeners maybe about yourself or Venezuelan football, which would challenge perhaps the status quo or perhaps some perceptions that are out there that you could correct by telling your side of football in Venezuela or your side of even being Venezuelan?
Well, yeah, definitely. It would be wrong to associate, the status of the country with the quality of football in the league. Venezuelan football has a very high standard. The league might not be the best in South America, but there's still very good players being developed there, and they compete in great tournaments, against teams from other South American countries, and they don't do badly against them. I think Caracas drew or might with Boca Juniors in the Libertadores last year, so they're not that far off, and I think it's definitely a league to keep an eye on, because there's definitely talent coming through. I can say it because I know the players. I know so many players that are actually coming through right now, and some are already, on the big stage, but it's definitely one to look at. And
from the players that you played alongside that are now knocking on the door of senior teams or already in the senior teams, who would you say are the ones to look out for?
Oh, definitely Danny Perez, obviously. He's being looked at now, well, obviously, because he's at Club Brugge. He's on the big stage, and, seeing him achieve that, is just so happy for me, knowing I actually had shared a pitch with him, and seeing him with professionals now in such a good league is, makes me smile every time I see him. And I follow Bruges on Instagram, so it's great to, be able to keep track of those kind of mates. But they're also, most of them, of course, are still in Liga FUTVE. As I mentioned, Clyde, Falla is in Spain. So, there are loads that, will definitely be coming through the ranks soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Oliver. I really appreciate your time and genuinely fascinating background and something very, very different from the usual. So thank you again for your time and your really insightful and fascinating answers.
No, Jordan, thanks to you. It's been an honor to be on this podcast, and, it's really interesting to talk about it, and, you're a great person. So thank you very much.